Hey, witches. I want to do some real talk. I'm part of several social media groups that involve witches. And I love having these magical discussions with you all. I adore it. I love getting past the small talk and just getting into the real. Alright, I lost. Alright, I seem to be. Okay, I lost my connection, but it seems to be back, so hopefully. Alright, sorry about that. So I love getting into this real talk with you all about your craft and how you practice and what it is that you do to really connect with your magic. And if you practice a religion with your craft, then how do you, connect with the divinity, ancestors, whatever. And the question that came up today that really got me fired up is somebody asked if they could have an altar in their bedroom. And it turned out to be really controversial. And I had no idea that it was going to be controversial. Why would that be controversial? But apparently it was. Some people were like, hell no, you can't have an altar in your bedroom. And now, let me back up. I think that there is also some misunderstanding about what an altar is. Or not necessarily misunderstanding, but an altar can be multiple things. And it seems like in this conversation, the altar was in reference to a place of divinity, to place offerings, to talk to the divine, to work with the divine, or with ancestors, so with an entity. This was not a working space or a sacred space. It was specifically related to other entities, it seems. And the original person asking this did not specify that. I'm not sure what the gender was, but they were just asking if they could have an altar in their bedroom. So originally I didn't know what the altar was going to be used for. And I did not see any clarification. So most of the responses were in regards to working with specific entities. And they were saying no, that you cannot have an altar in your bedroom because, when the few people who did clarify were saying, you undress in your bedroom, you have intimate relationships in your bedroom, and so on. And it would be inappropriate to do that in front of your altar, or where your altar, in your altar's line of vision. You need to treat it like a person welcomed into your home. And I'm not disagreeing in that you should have respect for entities you invite in your home into a sacred space. But I think that what a lot of people who were saying no outright was they were not considering the full scope of this question. First of all, and I'm trying not to get too fired up on here, because I feel very emotionally attached to when when people generalize a statement without thinking about it broadly. And I've done this, so I try to be mindful of it. Altars are very personal to a witch. They're just as personal as a book of shadows or a ritual tool that you've made or whatever. I mean, it's a very personal situation. So I'm not going to say do what feels good necessarily, but you do have to make it work for you and how you practice your craft. If you follow a specific tradition, then of course go by what that tradition dictates. However, to say that nobody can have an altar in their bedroom, the first problem I have with that is you're not taking into consideration people who only have one room. People who live in studio apartments or cannot share, have their ritual working in space or supplies out in other areas of a house. if you only live or can keep your stuff in one room, it's like saying to somebody, well, then you can't have an altar at all. Well, how do you work around working with entities in a space where you also are going to be intimate, etc.? Well, you veil it. You can lay a scarf over the altar. You can put up a box around it. You can keep it in a cupboard or an armoire. I mean, there are ways to kind of close up shop with your altar so that it is not necessarily affecting the other things you do in that space. And this can be done also even if you're not working with any entities. If it's just a working altar, sometimes it can still affect you when you're sleeping, like it can affect your dreams and all that. And if you're not wanting that to happen, veiling and closing it up can help with that. The other thing I wanted to bring up was a lot of people are like, well, you're undressing in that room. Well, that's like, if it's, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about that, because it's like saying that the nude body is inappropriate. And I don't necessarily believe that our, I mean, that's between you and your entities that you're working with. If they are offended by nudity, then yeah, definitely take that into consideration. But, what of witches who work skyclad? Or, I don't know, it seems a little silly to make that the one reason why you shouldn't have an altar in your bedroom. Another thing not taken into consideration is some people have altars in their bedroom because the bedroom is what they're working with. For example, if you are doing sex magic, or body positivity magic, or relationship magic, or any of that, then the bedroom sounds like a great place to have your altar. If you are working with deities associated with those topics, then yeah, bedroom's a fantastic spot for it. So it's just another topic that a lot of people are not taking into consideration. Or fertility magic, then yeah, have it there. Another thing was talking about, go by your tradition, go by how your ancestors did things. Well, that's all well and good. And if I had the property, I would totally have a sanctuary, sacred space to work with the divine that would be, separate from my home workings in a lot of ways and all that. But I think that you need to be really careful about saying do things exactly as our ancestors did, when so many of us are also working with online spaces and modern technology and modern methods of doing things. Thank you for the love, Karina. I'm so happy you're watching. Mwah. Yeah, we just need to be careful about stating stuff like that, because you have to take into consideration what is available to you, what is acceptable in our time frame as well, where you're working at. You have to kind of make it your own. So if you are anxious about having an altar in a certain area of your home, then just make it work for you. For me, it is better to have it in an area where my son isn't going to grab it, or it's not going to be in the way of other stuff in the house, or different things like that. Karina says, great topic. I know, right? I get really riled up about this, but at the same time, I feel like we should get passionate about how we do the basic stuff, like where we put our altar. And just be really careful about when we tell people general responses to this. We have to take into consideration, I don't know if this person has a mansion and can have a whole room to their practice. If we're going by what our ancestors did, well, many of them had temples, many of them worked outside, many of them, did all kinds of things. So that might not be available to an individual practitioner. And again, their altar might not be related to any entity, so it doesn't matter. It's just their workspace. I'm going to do a blog post about altars and how to set them up and ways to work around, should you veil it? Some altars, the figure on it is veiled all the time. If it's Nerthus, I think I'm pronouncing her name right, then she's always veiled. Or, if you're working with a entity devoted to chastity or focused on chastity, you might not necessarily want it in view of where you're intimate with your partner. This includes, saints, etc. So yeah, just things to think about. I didn't even really think about veiling my altars until I did some working with Galina Kraskova, and she was talking about it. I was like, oh my gosh, here I've been doing witchcraft and altar work for years, but I also didn't keep standing altars for very long. So maybe that was a big part of it as well. That makes a good point too. If your altar is a permanent altar, then it's a different topic than is it going to be up for just your working time and then you're going to take it back down. Then I don't think it really matters to where it's at, so long as it's not being it's private to you and whoever's working. So yeah, that's my little babbling about that right now. Like I said, I'll do a blog post with more detail later, but I wanted to go ahead and cover that because I had a lot to say on the topic. So thank you all for watching. Thank you, Karina, for sending me love. Alright,